Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Filmmakers Live. This is our podcast where we interview filmmakers who are mature in their careers and down the road of making films, so that you can learn from their experience. You can ask questions at the end of the podcast. You can come on and ask questions. And you know, everything that we do here at the Filmmakers Life is about money and earning and fundraising and building a career as a filmmaker. And I truly believe, oh, my name is Joanne Butcher. I forgot to say that. I'm a business coach for filmmakers. My belief is that filmmakers are the most creative and the most talented and the most hardworking people around. And yet they often find themselves spinning their wheels, not getting their films made, not getting the work they want. And so this podcast is designed to show filmmakers how to move forward in their filmmaking and in their careers, no matter what. And no matter how long they've been stuck. So you have come to the right place. And I'm so excited today to be able to introduce to you, to introduce to me, what's that? To introduce you, Shelley Seidenstein and Hafiz. And now I'm seeing only your first names, and now I can't remember your last name. So
Farid, right.
And Shelley, did I get your last name correct?
Perfect.
Oh, wow, look at that. So, yes, wonderful to have you here. And just to get us started, I always like to start with the same question, and let's go with Shelley first. So my question is, when did you first know that you were a filmmaker?
I would say in single digits. I was literally writing stories, both in my mind, fast forward, and just taking in everything and creating stories. And then very excited to be able to tell them when I got over the shyness of really revealing my stories. They were short. They were really short. But I was doing this as a kid. I was 8, 9 years old.
And you were writing them down?
Writing them, I actually, yes, not journals, but I was just writing them down. But it was really in motion in my mind. And
Beautiful.
I could actually see the reels going, and we had movies. My dad had a camera, and we used to splice downstairs the films because it was the celluloid, and you take it and you splice it and you tape it and whatever. We had that. As a matter of fact, I have just seen a video from back in those days. My daughter sent to me and shocked me, but I mean, it was there. It was very forward and present and big. I think I wanted to escape my childhood probably more than anything and write stories.
Yes. You know what, just the image that came into my mind as you were talking about this, Shelley, is the number one tourist destination in England. Not the number one, I guess, more people go other places. The number one highest rated tourist destination in England is the house where the Brontes grew up. And when you go to their house, they have in these cases all these little tiny books that they used to make when they were children, and they had story and they had pictures. They were like little graphic novels, little cartoon books, but that was the image that came to mind. And I'm sure we'll get back to escaping my childhood. Hafiz, what about you? When did you first know you were a filmmaker? It's unusual for people to know when they were children.
Yeah, I first want to thank you for this invite. It's an honor to be on the show, so we appreciate that and this opportunity.
It's an honor to have you both.
I don't know if that's a deep question, and that's a great question, and as I pondered it, I thought about something Pablo Picasso said. He said, every child is born an artist.
Mm.
The challenge is to remain an artist once you become an adult.
Mm.
And I think he was referring to a child's imagination.
Mm.
And you know, the first time you start drawing and the first time you start putting images on paper and I can remember being an early teen, maybe 13 or 14 years old, and having grown up with cartoons and animation and these incredible stories in the animated films. I can remember wanting and imagining making my own animation film, but telling the stories of African Americans that I never saw. And so there was an urge in me not only to pursue a career, but to tell our stories. That was a hunger that I had. And I imagined some of the stories that I had heard, like stories about Harriet Tubman, some of the great, you know, heroes and sheroes. I imagined that animated. So I guess I was imagining something that Hollywood wasn't making and the filmmaking industry wasn't making. They weren't telling our stories. And so that was the seed. And of course, you know, the fear of, you know, am I good enough to do this? Or can I do this? Or is it possible? Had to overcome that. And it took years before I really took pencil to pen and started writing a script and then short stories and then finally picked up a camera and said, I'm going to do this.
At what age did you pick up a camera? Do you remember?
It was about it was about maybe the first camera, I don't remember, but the first really focused camera, I was in my 30s, you know, and I had Edward Albee, the playwright, says sometimes you have to go a long way out of the way to find your way back home.
Lovely.
So
I often share this story, but I was very close friends with an Afro-Cuban director, Sergio Herrera. He just died earlier this year at 87 years old. And the first time I saw one of his films, we were showing his 6 feature films at Miami-Dade Community College when he first defected from Cuba. And so I was supposed to be the MC. I was supposed to run a Q&A after the film, you know, normal stuff for me. And we saw the film. All Sergio's films cover the history of Afro-Cuban people from the first enslaved people arriving to 1959. And whichever one of those films it was that we saw, I was supposed to run this Q&A afterwards, and I couldn't speak. And I was so embarrassed. And the next day I went to find Sergio in his office. And I told him, I said, I don't know what happened. You know, but I couldn't speak, and he didn't know me, you know. And he really helped me understand that I had never seen my ancestors on the screen before. So I'm of African Trinidadian descent, and these were Cuban, but I had never seen my people on screen before. And that what happened to me was that I was rendered speechless. And I tell that story just because I think that I just see the enormity of people seeing themselves represented on the screen. And when you were saying, well, I didn't see African-American people on the screen, so Hollywood wasn't doing it, so I had to do it. But I feel as though that is so profound, and it's not a small thing, you know, but to have the experience of seeing ourselves on the screen is
yeah. Now, I just remembered a small point I wanted to make, and that just came back to me because, like as you said, it's kind of hard to go all the way back and remember when you first knew you were a filmmaker. But I remember um, even before went and purchased my own camera and started doing it myself, I hired a person who was just a videographer to go around the inner city and take pictures. And growing up in Newark, and there was a whole rich tapestry of images and pictures and people. And I started making slides.
Mm.
And I got a collection of slides together. And I was always, from a very young age, a poet. And I started writing short stories or poems to go with these slides. And then I would go into the schools, and, and I started a nonprofit organization. I would go into the schools at the height of the crack epidemic and gang epidemic. And we would take these slides in, and with music. And, at that time, much of the technology that is available now to the average consumer was not available. So you couldn't afford an Arri camera, or you couldn't afford the technology to edit. And so I started out with slides. And I just remembered that kind of really was my first. In every school we went to, we had to have a slide projector, and it was always amazing that many schools didn't even have slide projectors so we'd have to bring our own. But I understood then how powerful images were to young people rather than lectures. And that's when I knew that image making or filmmaking was something that I wanted to do and had to do to tell our stories.
And did those students have that experience of the shock of seeing themselves?
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Like you said, it is a profound thing, and we don't think about it much, but I have a son I watch football with now, and I tell him that, the one of the most important positions is the quarterback. But for many years, as I was growing up until my teens, there was no such thing as a black quarterback in the NFL football league until the mid 60s, and it blows his mind because, now over half the quarterbacks are African American or black. And yeah, so it is a profound thing when you don't see your own people, you don't see your own shows. And there's a great story about Nat King Cole, who was one of the first African Americans to have his own show.
Right.
And it was I think the only, and it was a popular show with some of the biggest stars in the industry. And he was just, as everybody knows, an amazing talent. And yet his manager came back to him once and said, we're going to have to cut the show. They're going to take the show off the air. And he said, why? And he said, because the Southern sponsors don't want to see a black man selling their, while they're selling their products. They don't want to see a black man on the screen. And Nat King Cole's famous statement, as it stated, was, America's still afraid of the dark.
And in 2024, America's still afraid of the dark. So, we all worked together for 3 months, and I do not know how you two met and decided to start working together. So I'd love to hear that story.
Would you like me to start? Actually, it's interesting. Back in the day, we're talking about 20 years ago, I was very involved with our nonprofit organization, Kids Who Care, and we were in Newark Inner City. And every October for Domestic Violence Month, we would run a rather large event. And that particular year, the Newark Museum, which seated about 400 people, had gifted us the facility. And what we wanted to do was multifaceted in terms of the programming, but we definitely wanted a documentary film. And we had many submissions. I mean, we were loaded with docs on domestic violence. And it was brought to my attention that one of the films that we had was called A Pillar of Salt, The Angry Woman Syndrome, was done by a local film producer, filmmaker, writer, etc. Hafiz Farid. And we had that, and they said, well, since he's local, why don't we invite him for the screening? It would be nice to meet him. We get to see, or should we see the film first before we invite him to meet us? But at any rate, we did invite him, and he did come, and we watched it. And when the film ended, I sat for a moment and just said, I don't need to see any other film. It was so superb. It was such an intricate journey of not domestic violence, but the root causes of so many of the byproducts of these issues. And Hafiz, it was great to have met him. We actually did a phenomenal program. We had therapists, we had dancers, we had poets, we had everything, and it was packed. At that time, I was actually having one of my plays read in New York, and Hafiz and I were talking, and we had some great conversations about the arts, about life, about filmmaking, et cetera, et cetera. And I was completely, taken aback by this film. It was done, and Hafiz, if memory serves me correct, it was done by 7 men. Of course, he was the writer, director, producer, through the eyes of women for our children. And it encompassed, I think, well, Hafiz, you're better, this is your story, but it's like 200 women were interviewed, over 200 women were interviewed for this film. At any rate, I invited him to a reading. It was more than a reading, it was actually almost like a production of a play I had written in New York. And after that, we were talking again, and he said, would you like to work on a film with me? Now, I was not filmmaking at that time. I had taken different paths. I was in creative process for sure, but I wasn't producing. And I said, I would love to. And he said, I'm working on a film, DARFUR, Too Dark, Too Far. This is during the whole Sudan tragedy, genocide, which we have today, right now. And the rest is history. We've been ever since. He couldn't get rid
Yeah. Hafiz, can you tell the story, but can you also tell us a little more about Pillar of Salt?
Okay, without being too verbose, I'm trying to summarize. And once again, not just trying to flatter you, but that question to start this off, that question about when did you first know you were a filmmaker is so profound, because it contains so many, tentacles, and I think that the poet, the writer, deep down is always thinking about imaging, even when he's writing words. The words are just symbols and algorithms, but he's trying to put an image in your mind. He or she, you mentioned the Brontes, they're trying to put an image. In those books written by those great authors and poets, you saw images when you read those books, when you read those poems, when you read Robert Frost, miles and miles to go, and I took the road less traveled by. You see it. You see it. So I think the writer's always conjuring up in his mind images, because he wants to move people. He wants to make people laugh. He wants to make people cry. He wants to move people. And with the pen, the word, and then the images, and then the music, and it all goes together. But in succinct short story, that Pillar of Salt came about as a result of being at a lecture in New York, Lincoln Center, by a very great man in mind by the name of Eric Butterworth, who at that time was the head of Unity Center. And he was giving a lecture on anger and bitterness. And he was making the point that if you hold on to anger and bitterness, and you let anger turn into bitterness, and it takes root, then you can stifle your own creativity, your life force, your chi, your energy, and you can become hardened and crystallized. And then he made the analogy by telling briefly the story of Lot's wife, and he gave it a new perspective rather than giving it to you literally. He said, maybe that's what the story means, that Lot's wife, when she looked back, she became a pillar of salt. And I had never heard that interpretation before. You know, I have met people who say, oh, I thought that meant she turned to real table salt. Because we can sometimes take things so literally and don't delve and ponder. But these great writers and sages have much deeper meaning. And these are metaphors, these are parables. And so that perspective that he gave hit me like a thunderbolt. And I said, wow, imagine if I could, through cinematically, through images, convey what he just said, that you can become bitter if you look back on past hurt, loss, death, separation, divorce. You can become hardened and not be able to love. There's a great saying, I think by Emerson, uh, if one cannot forgive, one cannot love. And that for me gave me the template, the outline, and then all I had to do is now conceptualize how I was going to tell the story, you know. And like Shelley said, we had 7 men who came together. Some of them were investors, some of them were a cameraman, an editor, and we all decided, looking at ourselves, we came to the conclusion that the triggers for the anger and bitterness in the world, especially with the female figure, the woman, because she holds on, being a mother and being a nurturer. And we all, as men, got honest with ourselves and said, what have we done? What have men done historically to contribute to the anger or the bitterness of women? And we really got real honest, and everybody agreed that we should make this. And 7 men made this film, and the film is all women interviews, intimate, like cinema verite, truthful interviews with all women of all sizes, shapes, ages, ethnicities. And we shot it in a way where nobody could be in the room but myself, and then the director kind of like put himself in a way so that people would feel comfortable. And we established trust, and these women opened up in a way that was astounding to all of us. And some women shared certain things that they had never shared before.
Wow.
And when we met, fast forwarding, the film became a multi-award winning film, and we're very proud of it. But for 7 men to produce a film that includes all women and on an issue that affects women was something that women told us that was really amazing and really touched their hearts. And so we're very proud that we did that. Fast forward, many years later, I always wanted Maya Angelou to have a commentary on that film, to have a few words on that film. And then we got blessed through the hard work of Shelley and myself, constantly trying to persuade and reach Maya Angelou. And we finally got a response from her. And she said we could interview her. We had to come down to her home in North Carolina and had a very exclusive and intimate interview with her, which later became a film called Reflections of a Blessed Soul. Maya Angelou, Reflections of a Blessed Soul. And I asked Maya that question, and I told her that I had made the film, but I wanted to always edit her in and have her included. Would she just give me just a few words on the issue of anger and bitterness? And what she said was we had interviewed hundreds of women, and what Maya said was the most profound answer that I had ever heard on that issue. And Maya Angelou said, to the question about the bitterness and anger, she said, they're 2 different things. She said, anger is like fire. It burns off the dross. She said, there could be a fire in the forest and it burns wood, but leaves in its wake nutrients for the soil. And I got it. She was saying anger can be cathartic. It's not a bad thing, you know. But she said bitterness is like cancer.
Mhm.
It eats at the host.
Mhm.
She said bitterness will kill you. She said bitterness can be contagious and it affects you and you can't heal yourself and you can't heal anybody else. And when we
Yeah.
got that from Maya Angelou, we couldn't wait to rush back to the editing room and put that in. And that became like the cherry on the cake, so to speak. It became the ultimate explanation of that question that you just asked. I think that conveyed it all, you
Fantastic.
know.
How did you get Maya Angelou? You said it took a long time and a lot of hard
Well,
work.
Shelley Grodner Seidenstein. Even even though I knew she wasn't a filmmaker when I met her, I knew she had a persistence that, you know, that would wear her down, you know, like water can wear down steel or rock. So you have to have persistent people with passion and persistence, and anybody that knows Shelley, you know, knows that. So through emails, texts, phone calls, and never taking no for an answer, I think she wore Maya Angelou down. And one day she got a call back from Maya Angelou's assistant, and she basically said, "Okay, Shelley, well, she's agreed." Dude.
Your version of the story, Shelley.
Yeah, totally. I'm hoping that I didn't come across like Dracula. But I will say that there was a process, and for anybody who's on with us today, what's really important is respect and patience. And really, when you're reaching out to anybody in any form of a walk of life. So, you know, you have to start somewhere. So you start with publishers in this case, because she's published so many books. We knew it would not be possible to go directly to her, even if somebody said they knew her, they can get it to her. They did, you know, all the what I could do but can't do actually. So it was just a process of patience and waiting, and it took a while. It didn't happen.
It took about 7 years from the first.
Well, for you,
Seriously,
you said,
7 years from the first entree. You know,
yeah.
because I had met her at the Schomburg once, and I had my package. You know, when you're aspiring filmmaker, you're always carrying around your stuff, and you might have a tape in there, like, you know, and you know, it was, and but yeah, it took about 7 years.
Mhm.
Years ago, and now I don't remember his name, but many, many years ago, I had the opportunity to ask Stanley Kubrick's producer a question. And my question was, what makes a great relationship between a producer and a director? And he said, the producer does everything the director wants. And he told this story. Now, which film was it? It's the
Clockwork Orange.
about Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
Oh gosh, what is it? Full Metal Jacket. Is that
Right.
it?
Okay.
Jacket.
Yeah.
And he told this story that Kubrick wanted an exact American tank that was in Vietnam in the film. And so the producer was like, where am I going to get a tank from? And they didn't want to talk to him in America because he had made a movie that was anti-American, and they didn't want. So finally he gets onto this Belgian general, and they had some of these American tanks. And he said, we need this for the film. It's incredibly important. And the general said, you know, this is before email or anything like that. The general said, well, okay, you know, it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for us to get this tank to you and rent it to you. And he said, well, you know, we really don't have that kind of money. And the general said, oh, whatever, you know, we'll give it to you anyway. So they get this tank from Belgium over to England, where they're making a film about Americans in the Vietnam War. And now when you go back and watch that film, it's in 3 shots. And it looks as though there are all these tanks, but it's actually the same tank.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, that's a great
Story
answer.
told about being the ideal producer-director relationship when the director says, I need the tank, you get the tank.
Right.
Hafiz was like, I need my Angelou. Shelley's like,
Right.
I'm on it.
I actually needed her myself. I mean, following her since I was in college. A teacher had introduced me to her book when it first came out. I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. And I just couldn't believe that this woman, now this is like 69, 70, going through civil riots, all that's happening, and she could write, be so courageous as a Black woman to write and put her story out there of her life up until she was about 24 years old. And I honestly, I mean, I was like a groupie from that moment on. So everything she was doing that I could find out about and get my hands on, I was totally indulgent. So this was a dream for me that somebody once said to me, oh, you'll meet her one day. I said, yes, on the line of, Barnes and Nobles, but I never ever dreamt that I would actually be with Hafiz and Richard and Khalil in her home doing this film. So this is, patience. This is like 40 something years fast forward. And there it was, but it's like a moment in life that just comes together, and it's really quite profound. It really is. So yeah, that was an incredible experience. The film is really quite beautiful. It's a very unique film in that it's not your typical documentary where Hafiz might be interviewing Maya. She is in your face on the screen, and you think she's talking to you throughout the journey that she takes you on. And again, it's called it's Maya Angelou, Reflections of a Blessed Soul.
And can people get a hold of the film, or are you showing it places? Where is the film
We're
today?
currently in the process of going to Film Hub.
Okay.
We're at the last deliverables that they require to go on Film Hub. So the film will be available on Film Hub. Again, Maya Angelou, Reflections of a Blessed Soul. I want to thank you, so I don't forget, for all the help that you mentioned, the training that we went through with you. And that was a great help to us. And you've helping so many filmmakers shift their mindset. I love what you say in your training, that the majority of filmmakers spend most of their time telling their film rather than selling their film. And so you really, really gave us a great contribution in helping shift mindset to really understand that it's a business, and you have to get the money, and you have to be able to have the money to be able to market, to promote, to clear licensing, and to make the film available, because no matter how great the film is, if nobody sees it, it's like a tree that falls in the forest. So you've been very helpful, and it jump-started us to our most current film, which is called Two Sons of Georgia, The Untold Story. And your contribution to the raising funds for that film has been invaluable. And so we appreciate it. I just wanted to mention that. Also, that film was just received in the World Film Freeway Cannes Film Festival in Cannes. And we just got notice that it was also picked up in the Czech Republic in Prague. And it was screening.
Are you thinking of going to Prague for the screening?
France, more so.
France. Okay. Yes.
No.
I have never been to Prague, but I've heard it's amazing. So
okay.
So tell us a bit about the Two Sons of Georgia. I'd love for everybody to hear about this film.
Two Sons of Georgia, let me start off by saying, when I first conceived the idea, it was based on the realization that both of these great dynamic leaders of the African American community and of the world, because they became international figures, not just American figures, but both of them were born in Georgia. So they're native sons of Georgia. But then I started thinking about the impact that they had on America and the world. And I said, the name or the word sons, S-O-N, is really not adequate. And I changed that to sons, S-U-N. And that's to convey the idea that these were two of the most illuminating lights, the brightest lights in one of the darkest periods of American history. And then I started delving into, and we as a team started delving into all the parallels of the two sons of Georgia. Both of them were born in Georgia. Both of them were sons of Baptist preachers. Both of them were grandsons of Baptist preachers. And both of them were boy preachers, young preachers themselves. And so the parallels became so, incredible. Martin Luther King, Reverend Martin Luther King's father, Daddy King, was born in 1897.
Huh.
And Elijah Muhammad was born in 1897. And so you just started seeing all these parallels as we uncovered and peeled back this story. And then it was something I had known, that there was a meeting between the two of them, but it was something that I knew that it had been suppressed and repressed. And the more people I met throughout the years didn't know that meeting ever took place. It was almost a secret meeting. And Elijah Muhammad, in one of his letters to Dr. King, because it was Elijah Muhammad that actually initiated the reaching out. So this is the elder speaking, reaching out to a younger Dr. King for the purpose of sitting down together and with the idea of coming together to find a solution to the problems of African Americans in this country as it relates to freedom, justice, and equality. And that in itself is incredible, that he was humble enough in his wisdom, and he was at that time probably the most powerful African American leader in the country. The organization was the richest Black organization in the country. And yet he had the vision, the wisdom, and the humility to understand that we must have a united front. That was his own words. And so it took 10 years. And so this film really kind of deals with a 10-year period from 1958 to 1968, approximately. So that we're not dealing with the personal lives of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad or Dr. Martin Luther King. This film is about the ideologies that they both advocated. One advocated integration as a solution to the problem. The other advocated separation, and separation meaning, to just give a side note, meaning self-independence, not isolation, but self-independence, the same way any other ethnic group in this country has. If there's a Chinatown or Koreatown, there should also be an African-American town, that we have our own banks, our own schools, our own supermarkets, and be self-sufficient. That is as much needed today as it was back then. And so we also wanted to make sure that we made the film relevant to young people in dealing with, we didn't want to make a civil rights film. We were determined that it wasn't just going to be a civil rights film highlighting two historical figures, but the ideologies, because we find ourselves almost in the same boat, if not worse. The wealth disparity in this country is wider than it's ever been. And so Dr. Martin Luther King's last book that he wrote before he was murdered was called Where Do We Go From Here? Community or chaos? And that proverbial question is still the question today for tens of millions of African Americans. Where do we go? How do we find our freedom, justice, and equality? James Baldwin once said, if you're an African American, it means that you're an African without your real memory. And you're American without your full citizenship and equal rights. A very profound statement. And so, yeah, Two Sons of Joy, the untold. So it's an untold story. And I've talked to not only lay people, Muslims, Christians, lay people, white, Black, but I talked to scholars from some of the most prestigious schools in this country. We were just at Princeton last night talking to some of the faculty there, and we plan to take this film to Princeton very soon. But
Wonderful.
but many of the scholars that I've talked to knew nothing about the meeting that took place between the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King actually came to that meeting with his wife, and she was, ecstatic, elated to be there with that meeting with this great man and have them together. That meeting is documented. We have the pictures. We have both men talking about it. So this is not a docudrama. This is a documentary. And I know you know that, but for our audiences, the documentary is different in that it is just the facts and evidence. Just the facts, man. And so in the credits, we have written by Elijah Muhammad and Martin Luther King, because 95 to 98% of everything you hear in the film from these two men are their own words, not our opinions.
When you go to a place like Princeton with Two Sons of Georgia, which department are you working with? Which branch?
Well, we're in communication right now with Princeton has a great program called the Princeton Muslim Life. And for 15 years, they have done an annual program highlighting the contributions of the African-American Christian community, and that's very important. That was always important for Elijah Muhammad to come to his people with a perspective and a program that fit their condition. And many times critics would say, you're not following the exact precepts or, of what you're teaching, the faith. And Elijah Muhammad would say, I'm trying to get a baby out the fire. That's how dire our situation was.
He was criticized for not teaching a pure version of Islam. Is that
right? Yeah. Right. And he said many times, and it's documented, that, that will come. I'm here to clean you up first. I'm here to get you ready, for that. He knew what he was dealing with, and he did a miraculous job. It's almost, and that's why now universities throughout the country and the world are still studying this phenomenon that happened, and so to answer your question about the different departments, you have today on many of the colleges, you have the African American Students Unions or the Black Students Union. You have the Muslim Students Associations, and you have, as I just said, you have Princeton Muslim Life. Harvard has a Muslim chaplain. And so America is opening up, to receive other faiths and other religions as the precepts of their, Constitution says, freedom of religion. And so we're very happy to be able to take this film into universities, because young people need to know not just who these people were, but they need to hear and look at the ideologies. And also the film deals with the issue of reparations. And that's a front burner issue today. There's a bill right now called HR 40, a $14 trillion bill to study the ways that reparations can be exacted and given to African Americans that have been held back. So that's current. That's something that all across this country, we're not seeing it on the mainstream news, but there's reparation movements. The presidential candidates this year were asked that question: do you support reparations? And ironically, the Democratic nominee Harris said yes, absolutely. Where her predecessor, Obama, at the Apollo, was asked that when he was running, and he said no. So you begin to see a shift in the American mindset in society and African Americans. And so, so that is a very important point, and it makes it more contemporary for young people today. Dr. King's daughter, along with some other investors, bought a bank recently in Utah. They have their own bank. Now, that's astounding because that mainly was what Elijah Muhammad was advocating, not her father. But at the end of Dr. King's life, Dr. King and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad were singing the same song. There's this famous statement that has been documented where Dr. King says two statements that are very profound and I think important to say. Dr. King said to Harry Belafonte days before he was murdered, "I think I've integrated my people into a burning house." America has lost its moral compass. And when you lose your moral compass, you can lead people only to an abyss. And then he said at a rabbinical convention, a Jewish convention, he was asked these same questions. And Dr. King said, "I have come to the conclusion that a separation, even if it's just a temporary one, as a way station, is the only way that we can ever achieve true integration." And that's Dr. King.
Is the HR 40 bill the California bill? Is that
No, this is a federal bill. There's a
Federal.
California bill that there's been an executive order. That's a good question because I was just up in Massachusetts, and people from all over the country were at an event called Reparations Now, and it was sponsored by Ben and Jerry's, and so it was people from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who said that an executive order has already been given to repair the loss of that town and the land and over 600 businesses that were burned to the ground, which is commonly referred to as Black Wall Street, but it's also a misnomer to think that was the only self-sufficient Black town. So when we talk about self-independence and reparation, it's not anything outlandish or new. There were over 100 self-sufficient independent towns. And when African Americans were first freed from slavery or emancipated, they were not given any land. Like land grants were given. Thousands and thousands of acres of land were given to European peasants. And then agricultural schools were built for them and training, but nothing was given. Like Frederick Douglass said, free to what? Free to famine.
Right.
And so the African American did not go headlong into integration as a solution. African Americans began buying land, began building their own schools, began building their own homes and businesses and communities. And so it's not anything new. It's something that we need to go back and look at and find a way that we can
and
codify.
began their own fundraising.
Right. That's right. And that was done.
There's a long tradition.
There's a long tradition. Way before Spike Lee or John Singleton, there were men in the early 1900s who were independent Black filmmakers who had their own companies, their own production, and they made many movies. And at that time, they were called race movies.
Yes, but I meant fundraising. Fundraising to, but build the school. Fundraising to,
Yes.
I'm just obsessed with fundraising.
I know you're a fundraiser.
Totally. Great point, though. And Hafiz, thank you for the thank yous to Joanne. Of course, I'm right with you. Joanne, I'll just share this with the group, is that when we first met, we shared the films, and Joanne, you took a great interest in what we were doing, and you came back to us in time and gently. And you said, "You are so gifted, your films are really incredible, and I love them. I just can't," and you had nightmares about, you've got into the real details of the films. And then you said, "But you know what I really think also, which is probably the problem, is that you're anti-money." And it was the first time for me that I actually heard this approach to analysis about us. But it's true, in the sense, not consciously, but everything that we're doing is basically through camera's eyes. The creative process is getting these things done. We rush to it. We get an idea or a concept, whatnot, and we have to put it to work. And that whole entire part of the most important thing that is going to generate the film to be out there is the business, is the money.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting us on track.
Yeah, what you're doing, Joanne, is so valuable to filmmakers, because as you started out saying, they may be the most creative people, you know, that you know of, and yet you can get caught in the Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole of creativity.
Yes. Never get out.
and and you have to get out,
All out.
and you have to raise money, and so you help thousands or tens of thousands of people shift their mindset and beginning to recognize that you need money, and you have to have money to do business, rather than you just don't do business to make money. You have to have money to do business. You have to get the money in order to do the business, to pay the bills, to pay the marketing, the promotion, the editing, the publicity, and so
And
again,
excellent.
you're doing a great work. I sincerely mean that, and you're
Thank
blessing
you.
to the world of art and filmmaking.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And Imam has had his hand up for a while, so we're going to open it up to questions.
Okay, I just want to say one more thing, and you have one of the best assistants that I've ever recognized in Emily Stewart.
Yes. And I have
Emily Smart. I mean, Emily Smart.
And now we have Innocent Adegboa as well, who is also amazing. So
Oh, great.
we have a fabulous team. Imam,
Great.
please go ahead with your question.
Good evening. It's more of a statement. I just want to commend you all on a phenomenal work. I just, at the age of 76 years old, got my master's degree from the University of Chicago. And really, I was writing about the three great African-American religious leaders, namely Dr. Mays, Dr. Thurman, and then Imam Wahid Muhammad. But as a childhood Baptist preacher, I was ecstatic when I heard that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Dr. King, they actually met three times. And Dr. King, they both looked to Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Dr. King. I think Honorable Elijah Muhammad posed the question to Dr. King. He said, Reverend, never disrespectful, not like Malcolm, never disrespectful. He said, Reverend, do you think we're leading our people into a burning house? And they both broke down and cried. And as they left, the press asked them the question, said, will we one day be addressing you? What did you all talk about? He said, well, we are two sons of Georgia preachers talking about Georgia. And I tell you, Farid, if I didn't love you, I had intended to write that book, because I'm so sick of James Cone and all people who are really absolute liars and fabricators of history and not willing to give the Honorable Elijah Muhammad his due. These men were the process of history, the two strains of African-American history. It's always been the inner life and the outer life. So to put them in opposition, may God reward you. And my ministry is going to make a small donation to you. Right now, it's going to be a token, but I'm prepared to help you raise the money. I've been knowing you for years, Brother Farid, and you've always been on point. And let me just commend you all, other fine people. See, it takes brilliance and humanity to recognize another person's brilliance and humanity. And sometimes you can see a person on a daily basis, you just dismiss them. But you had the recognition, Shelley and Joanne, to this said, I will work with this guy. This is a great idea. Whereas you can run into people on a daily basis. They see you, they may live with you, they may even a bean pie with you. And they have money. And I mean, there are a lot of, and Farid and I both know people with money inside the Muslim community and outside the Muslim community. And maybe that would buy you a bean pie. So, brother, may God bless you. May your team be continuously blessed. And I'm a preacher. I'm a preacher and a politician, so I had to learn how to shut up. So I would shut up. God bless me.
I want to say thank you so much, Imam, because making an offer to make a donation is wonderful. And thank you so much. Making an offer to fundraise is an entirely different thing.
And I would be willing to help fundraise, because I'm planning to go on a national tour starting in January called the Anti-KKK. It doesn't stand for Ku Klux Klan, but the movement to stop African Americans in particular, and others in general, from killing each other, de-glamorize the streets. And I'm just going to be working with a guy just got out of jail, did 36 years in prison. It is the kin killing kin. That's my movement. And that's my signature movement, my last ministry as I close out my years on earth. So y'all pray for me.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And you, the fundraiser, Farid, please put me in touch together. Maybe we can do some mutual fundraising together. And as I travel around the country, I will be doing much to promote this idea of Farid. Actually, it should be a motion picture coming next to you. But it's time now with this new era. And this is the last thing. You know, I'm going to tell you all something. This is a very rare, my children call me the Black Forrest Gump, and I kind of understand why. They said, Daddy, you knew everybody. I knew Dr. King's father when I was a little boy and a childhood preacher. But I also know the president, the future president of the United States. I remember her as a little baby. Her father, Don Jasper Harris, was my economics teacher at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and I knew her mother. So Don could dance better than I can. He's a Jamaican African American. I'm an African American from Lynchburg, Virginia, and I have 2 left feet, and probably the physical dexterity of a worm. But thank you again. God bless, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you
So much. So you heard that, right, Hafiz and Shelley?
Yes, I heard it, and I second it. I think the really good point that the brother just made that reminded me of something I always want to say is one of the main purposes in producing this film was to correct the narrative. The historical narrative. As you said one time, this is journalistic. We approach this as you would be approaching a PhD thesis, to be very honest with you. And we have a partner in our film company by the name of Tamar Davis, who is one of the most brilliant researchers and analytical thinkers that I have ever met. He's a bibliophile ever since I've known him as a young teenager. He is now graduated from Pace University. He has his degree, master's degree in library science, and is presently the director of a public library in Westchester County in New York. And the research that this man did in excavating the material, FBI documents that have never been seen before that are now been made public. And he did a tremendous work, but we approached it in that way so that we would attack the misinterpretation of both these men. One of these men has been sanitized and deodorized. And so now every year when they present Dr. King to us, they present him in a very passive way as just a dreamer, not a, practical, pragmatic thinker. He was a brilliant man. He had his PhD when he was in his early 20s. And so one person has been deodorized and sanitized and neutralized to a great extent. The other person, Elijah Muhammad, has been vilified and demonized. And we really don't know who he is and the love that he had for his people, the love that he had for freedom, justice, and equality. And most people cannot get out of that mindset to see him as a person that he wasn't a hate monger. He wasn't a person that was totally against America. He wasn't teaching that we should leave America. He knew that we had an investment here, that our stakes were here, and that we had a part in the building of this country. He just wanted us to have freedom, justice, and equality like everybody else. And I heard his son, Warithuddin Muhammad, who basically is an inspiration for us and a guiding light in this film. He's not in the film, but the film is produced with his perspective and his mindset in mind. So we're very glad to say that. And the event we were at last night was honoring his legacy, Warithuddin Muhammad. He's the person that took over the community after his father passed away. But I heard him say one time, he was talking about these two men, Elijah Muhammad and Martin Luther King and their confluence and their impact on America. And he said Martin Luther King shamed America to death by putting up the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all the beautiful words that have been said, and asked America that one day we pray that you live up to the meaning of this, your creed, and live up to the meaning of your words. So he shamed America. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad scared America to death. You know, and not that he ever was talking about attacking America, but he scared America with the truth, with the raw truth of the history and what had been done. And both of them, and this is very seldom and rarely put on them, but both of them were advocates of reparation. Dr. King, at his famous speech in Washington, said, "You gave us a blank check. We're here to collect." You know, he was asking for reparations, for America to make good on its promises. And Elijah Muhammad was asking for reparations all the time, in the back of every paper, what the Muslims want. And so they are closer to each other than most people ever dreamed. And one of the desires and prayers of this film is that we can bring America closer together, that we can bring people from both communities, from all the communities together. And when you see this film, it ends with a very beautiful image that exists now in Dubai, that conveys the Abrahamic faith. All these three religions actually adhere to Abraham as the father. And so in Dubai, they've built 3 edifices in the same acreage, where you have a mosque, a synagogue, and a church, all on the same grounds. You know, and and that's really, we don't, this film is not just trauma, and it's not just the horrors that African Americans went through, but it has hope. And both of them were dreamers and doers. And now the challenge for us is, all of us, black, white, brown, yellow, you know, whatever religion, the challenge for us is, do we pick up the mantle? Do we pick up their dream and make it a reality for these young people, so that we make this world a better place than it was when we leave it?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming today. And it's such a pleasure always to spend time with you. And I wanted to just say, before we ended, when you said early on, America is afraid of the dark, this is a piece of art from Haiti. It's called a veve. It's another religion. From the Voodoo religion, and these are from, you know, African keys. Anyway, it's called a veve, and so that's my I have that up now to show solidarity.
Yeah.
And just another religion to add to the list.
Right. Well, I like what Khalil Gibran says. They're all like fingers of one hand.
Yes.
It's
Exactly.
all one.
Exactly.
That's what we're trying to convey also, that the oneness.
Yes. A friend of mine years ago said that religion is like a buffet, a very fancy, full buffet, and I'm a hungry man.
Beautiful.
I
That's beautiful.
So he just said it in past. I've repeated it so many times.
Beautiful.
So thank you so much for your time.
And I just would like to also mention our skeletal team that we literally have been working with for all these years. As Tamara Davis was mentioned by Hafiz and Richard Woods, and we had an editor that joined us straight out of college who was great, Matthew Sabush, and we had a sound editor, Nathaniel Hawkins, and you know, Jesse McConnell. So that was the family. So the answer is, when people ask, can you really do it with just such a small group? The answer is you can. You have the
Yeah.
talent and the gift and the commitment and, you know, and generosity, you know,
Yeah.
combined. So it happens. So we can do it.
I think that's the another amazing thing about when we go with this film publicly and we bring everyone on stage and people can see that the film was produced by male, female, black, white, Christian, Jew, Muslim, you know, and that's an amazing, I think, example of
Yes.
oneness that we're trying to convey in the film. And there was one other person I have to mention that's part of that skeletal team that has been with us ever since he was too
Oh.
small to even walk, and his name is Joanne Farid, my son. He was almost at every editing session, you know.
I'm sorry, Gibran, yes. And interestingly enough, his grandson, Khalil, came with us to Maya Angelou's home. She, just as a wrap here, just for her generosity, she asked, and he's very modest, he was an excellent student, he was in high school at the time getting ready for college, and she said to him, so Khalil, are you a good student? And he really didn't know how to answer it. He was so humble. And Hafiz interjected and said, he probably won't say this. He is a good student. He's a great student. He's an honor student. He's an advanced, etc. And she said to him that if you need a letter of help when you apply to colleges, let me know. And it was such a beautiful gesture from just the reaction of seeing him, his presence, but to feel him in his humble way. So I just wanted to share that with interpersonal relationships can be really phenomenally beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming and listening in. Thank you, Emily and Innocent, for all your help. And there's another edition of the Filmmaker's Life. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you again. Thank you.